Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. India hits back after President Trump threatens to substantially raise tariffs over Russian oil imports, calls the targeting of India unjustified and unreasonable, and vows to take necessary measures to protect national interests. Trump's fresh tariff threat spooks sentiment, but the Lal Street closes with minor cuts. The Nifty slips below 24,700. Banks remain the biggest drag. It's a divided house on the eve of the RBI monetary policy. A CNBC TV18 poll shows economists and market participants are split right down the middle on a potential rate cut tomorrow. The Finance Ministry is currently in talks with SEBI to curb excessive speculation in the F&O markets. A shift away from weekly to fortnightly expiries, lower margins for cash trades and a cut in securities transaction tax may be considered to reduce speculation and increase cash trades. Axis Bank veteran Rajiv Anand appointed the new CEO of Indisin Bank on a 3-year term. CNBC TV18 was the first to report that Anand was the frontrunner. He takes over after Indisin Bank admitted to a forex derivative accounting lapse leading to losses of nearly 2,000 crore rupees and a management change. British luxury car maker Jaguar Land Rover is all set to have an Indian in the driver's seat. PBBalaji, currently Tata Motors CFO, will succeed Adrian Mardell as the CEO in November. Enforcement Directorate questions Anil Ambani over an alleged 14,000 crore rupee loan fraud case. The summons comes after the ED searched nearly 40 premises linked to Anil Ambani. A cloudburst triggers massive flash floods in Uttarakhand's Uttarkashi district. Several houses swept away, mainly reportedly trapped under the debris. The Indian Army, the NDRF and the SDRF have been roped in for rescue operations. BJP President JP Nadda and Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge engage in a face-off in the Rajya Sabha. Kharge protests against the presence of CISF personnel in the well of the House. When members were protesting, the deputy chair says the personnel were from the Parliament Security Service. Nadda says the opposition should take tuitions from him on how they should behave. Health officials in Gaza claim 8 people have died in the last 48 hours due to starvation. Israel ramps up the military campaign with air and land attacks. The overall death toll in Gaza crosses 61,000 in nearly 2 years of the war. Well, let's go straight to the top story this evening. India has hit back at the United States for threatening higher tariffs and a penalty for trading with Russia, especially over energy imports. Now, in a social media post, President Trump said, and I quote, "India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, they are then, for much of the oil purchase, selling it in the open market for big profits. Because of this, I will be substantially raising the tariff paid by India to the US," end of quote. Now, responding to the US president, the Ministry of External Affairs in a statement has said that targeting of India is unjustified and unreasonable, and it's promised to take all necessary measures to safeguard national interests and economic security. India said it began importing from Russia because traditional supplies were diverted to Europe after the Ukraine war. In fact, India went on to say the US actively encouraged imports of Russian oil as it strengthened global energy security market stability. New Delhi has also called out the US and Europe for criticizing India's trade with Russia when both countries themselves are indulging in trade. The ministry said Europe's bilateral trade with Russia in 2024 was worth over 67 billion euros in terms of goods and services trade, worth over 17 billion euros in 2023. This, the Indian government says, is much more than India's total trade with Russia in the same period. India has also called out the US for importing uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry and palladium for its EV industry, along with fertilizers from Russia. Reacting to the developments, Mukesh Aghi of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum said it is not in the interest of India or the US to get into a contest over trade with Russia. Take a look.
Just basically get away from getting into public media challenging Trump, because the moment you get into a contest, it's, he basically goes all the way down to ensure that he comes out as a winner. So my recommendation is don't react and stay focused on what's good for the country and move on.
Now, the United States has yet to sanction Russian oil or energy. And as the statement from the Ministry of External Affairs mentioned, the US was actively encouraging India to buy oil from Russia. This was because of a sharp spike in oil prices, with Brent crude hitting $137 per barrel way back in March 2022 after Russia invaded Ukraine. In November of 2022, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said, and I quote, "The United States is happy for India to continue buying as much Russian oil as it wants, including at prices above a G7 imposed price cap mechanism, if it steers clear of Western insurance, finance and maritime services bound by the cap." End of quote. In February of 2024, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Jeffrey Patt acknowledged India's role in stabilizing global energy markets. He said, and I quote, "India has played a key role in efforts to stabilize global energy markets through its purchases of Russian crude." End of quote. Now, just a few months ago, in May of 2024, U.S. Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, admitted that India bought Russian oil because the U.S. wanted somebody to buy Russian oil, and the U.S. allowed the purchase to ensure oil prices do not go up globally. Here's Eric Garcetti, the former U.S. Ambassador to India.
And we take the smaller victories, like actually they bought Russian oil because we wanted somebody to buy Russian oil at a price cap. That was not a violation or anything. It was actually the design of the policy, because as a commodity, we didn't want oil prices going up, and they fulfilled that.
So that's Eric Garcetti, the former U.S. ambassador to India, saying the U.S. welcomed India's purchase of Russian oil. Now, President Trump is scheduled to speak exclusively to CNBC at 5:30 p.m. this evening. Stay tuned to CNBC TV 18 for the biggest interview of the day. We will hear more from President Trump. But let's move to the day's market action. The market closed with minor cuts after President Trump threatened to substantially raise tariffs over Russian oil imports. The Nifty slipping below 24,700, largely dragged lower by Reliance and banking heavyweights. Surbhi standing by to wrap up the market action for us. Surbhi.
Well, it was a weekday of trade and India was a little isolated, felt a little lonely in the fall because most of the markets had a flourishing close. The Asian markets, including mainland China, Hong Kong, etc., Japan as well. And while we were trading, Europe was also tracking gains. Now, two things are happening. In India, this whole nervousness and unease with respect to the trade relations with the US, they are definitely weighing on sentiment. And on the other hand, global markets are rallying, anticipating a Fed rate cut in September. So let's talk about the trading action here. At one point in time, the Nifty was threatening to give up even 24,600. But then there was a recovery towards the last 20 minutes of trade, which means that we've given up less than half of Monday's gain. But the losses were pretty much across all sectors. If you take a look at it in terms of, the sectoral bias, pharma and the capital markets part of the market was actually weakest. Pharma, of course, for obvious reasons, uncertainty around what's happening next in terms of those US tariffs. So if you see a lot of these stocks, Cipla, Dr. Reddy's, Sun Pharma, Aurobindo, all of them were weak. On the tariff wars, we had a lot of the textile and apparel exporter stocks. They got hit quite hard. Gokuldas Exports, for instance, was almost down 8-9%. There was Well-Spun Living losing about 4% as well. Let's talk about the wider fall on the Nifty. The losers beyond pharma names included the likes of Adani Ports, Adani Enterprises. A lot of the heavyweights were under pressure today. Reliance Industries, ITC, Infosys, all these stocks were nursing cuts and losses today. Banks, diverging moves coming in. The larger private sector names like HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank, second day running, both of them were weak and slightly nervous, it seemed, ahead of the policy. But then SBI was trying to cut the losses. There was some buying on Kotak Mahindra Bank as well. And speaking of banks, of course, have to mention IndusInd. Positive market reaction, almost 2% higher. All hopes being now pinned on Mr. Rajiv Anand to orchestrate a turnaround in operations. Let's talk about mid-caps. I remember I told you the capital market side of the market was quite weak. Well, that showed up in stocks like BSC, in stocks like MK Global and Angel One. Our colleague Yash put out the story that perhaps the regulator is considering several additional measures to curb activity in the F&O market even further, and that weighed down on sentiment. Other market movers, the ones on the upside today included Godfrey Phillips, positive reaction to earnings, almost 10% higher. Siemens, Solar Industries, Force Motors and New India Assurance also managed to find a couple of gains. It's going to be all about earnings tomorrow, so we'll be looking at the numbers from Britannia and Bharti Airtel post the bell. And of course, tomorrow is a big day for autos. Bajaj Auto, Hero Moto, these are some of the biggies that will report.
Yes, we'll be watching those very closely. Surbhi, many thanks. What we're also going to be watching closely is RBI's Monetary Policy Committee. It will announce its rate decision tomorrow. Now, President Trump's India tariffs threaten growth and inflation. Undershooting RBI's forecast will remain key focus cues for the MPC. A CNBC TV 18 poll of top economists shows a clear split. Half expect a 25 basis point cut, while the other half say the Monetary Policy Committee will hold rates steady. Our special coverage on the RBI's policy decision starts at 9:45 a.m. tomorrow morning. Reliance Group Chairman Anil Ambani appeared before the Enforcement Directorate in Delhi. This pertains to the alleged 17,000 crore rupee loan fraud case. The ED issued a low-card notice against Anil Ambani on the 1st of August, stopping him from leaving the country. Authorities had also conducted raids at more than 35 locations across Mumbai and Delhi related to the Reliance Group and its entities. India's Services Purchasing Manager Index climbed to an 11-month high of 60.5 in July against 60.4 in June. This as per the HSBC India PMI data. The services sector has now recorded expansion for 4 consecutive years. This was largely led by new client onboarding, solid demand and an improvement in export orders. Similarly, the composite PMI has also inched higher to 61.1 in July. Shares of Paytm's parent 197 Communications down sharply in trade today. This after investment firm Antfin exited the company by selling nearly 6% stake via multiple block deals. The sale may have fetched Antfin over $450 million. The exit from Paytm has come at a steep loss of nearly $2 billion. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway sold its entire stake in Paytm in November of 2023. Luxury car maker Jaguar Land Rover was all set to get an Indian in the driver's seat. Tata Motors Chief Financial Officer PBBalaji has now been appointed as the CEO of Jaguar Land Rover, effective from November of 2025. He will take over from Adrian Mardell, who's retiring after a 3-year stint at the helm. Balaji has been serving as Tata Motors CFO since 2017, as has over 3 decades of experience in the auto and consumer sectors. So a change of guard there at JLR. Speaking of change of guard, CNBC TV 18's Newsbreak has been confirmed. Indisin Bank has appointed Rajiv Anand, the new MD and CEO, for a 3-year tenure. The bank's shares surging in trade post the announcement. This post has been vacant since Sumant Katpalia's exit in April this year following the accounting discrepancy. We were the first to report in June that the former Axis Bank Deputy MD, Rajiv Anand, was the front-runner for the post. Ritu's here with more. Ritu, congratulations first on that news break. What does Rajiv Anand's appointment mean for Indisin Bank, and what will be the challenges that he's going to have to cope with?
Well, big development for Indisin Bank, with the Reserve Bank of India approving Rajiv Anand's name for the MD and CEO position for a 3-year term effective the 24th of August. We were the first to report that Rajiv Anand was shortlisted by the board and was a front-runner for the position on the 27th of June, and now it is official. A chartered accountant and commerce graduate, Rajiv Anand is a financial services veteran with over 35 years of experience, known specially for his expertise in capital markets. He began his career as a trader at HSBC and joined Axis Group in 2009 and became the founding CEO of Axis AMC. Since 2013, he's been on the board of Axis Bank, where he headed both retail and wholesale banking and rose to become its deputy MD in 2021, retiring just a few days back. And now he steps into a bank which is at a crossroads. Indisin Bank is recovering from a massive loss in the 4th quarter, its worst ever, driven by accounting lapses. It bounced back in the 1st quarter with a profit, but the damage triggered a string of senior-level exits. The bank's chairman, Sunil Mehta, though, has assured investors that legacy issues are behind and the impact of all these irregularities has already been absorbed. He also outlined a 5-point focus for the bank, including a profitability-first approach, cost discipline and a focus on recoveries. So when Rajiv Anand takes charge, his task will be cut out, and it is a tall order. First and foremost, of course, to stabilize the ship, rebuild the bank's reputation and restore stakeholders' confidence, fix the internal control systems and ensure a sustainable return to profitability while cleaning up the books as well. Equally important will be to rebuild the core team. The bank has been without a CEO and deputy CEO since late April and is currently being run by an executive committee. He must also execute the 30,000 crore rupee capital raise to make sure that the balance sheet is strengthened, while also managing the ongoing fallout from the accounting lapses, the MCA probe being the latest.
All right, Ritu, many thanks. Now, Adani Ports has reported a stable set of numbers in the 1st quarter. Net profit up 6%, revenue jumped 21% on an annual basis. However, margins contracted in the quarter. The company's also said that Gautam Adani will be redesignated as the non-executive chairman of the company. Adani will also cease to be a key managerial personnel of the company. No explanation given as to why this change has been ordered. In global earnings, BP reported a stable set of numbers in the 2nd quarter with profit beating street estimates. The energy giant reported an underlying profit of $2.35 billion and has increased its quarterly dividends to 8.32 cents. The company will also maintain the pace of its share buyback program at $750 million for the second quarter. Saudi Aramco, meanwhile, reporting a decline in net profit for the 10th straight quarter. This after lower crude oil and refined chemical product prices outweighed the impact of higher production. Net income attributable to shareholders fell by 19% to $22.8 billion in the second quarter, missing estimates. Revenue also fell to over $100 billion. Now, the Finance Ministry, we learn, is currently in talks with the market regulator SEBI to curb excessive speculation in the F&O market. Sources tell us that SEBI may consider a shift away from weekly to fortnightly expiry and cut securities transaction tax. Yash is standing by with more. Yash, what is the plan that both the government and SEBI are considering?
We had reported this earlier that market regulator SEBI is working and looking out for ways in which it can reduce options market trading and the speculation there, and as against that actually focus on increasing the volumes in the cash market. Now what we've been given to understand from our sources is that the Finance Ministry has also sort of been in discussion with market regulator SEBI with the same agenda that options volumes and the speculation there needs to be reduced. On the other hand, cash market volumes need to be increased. According to our sources, the Finance Ministry is of the view that options market volumes or the transactions there is not meaningfully adding to any productive side of the economy. In fact, it is not even being effectively used for hedging and only being used for speculation, whereas cash market volumes and the transactions there would actually add to the productive economy. It is with this rationale and indication that Finance Ministry is in discussion with market regulator SEBI to explore ways, asking SEBI to explore ways to look at how options volume can be reduced. Now, there are three important suggestions which market regulator SEBI is also considering to reduce options market volume. The first one is with respect to the expiry itself. We have weekly options expiry. Market regulator SEBI is likely to consider an option to make this weekly expiry and turn it into a fortnightly, which is every 15 days, or even a monthly expiry if needed, which will help them reduce the options market speculation and the volume. The second option is to sort of propose or ask the government to reduce securities transaction tax or STT on cash market volumes, essentially to incentivize cash market volumes, which will automatically bring down the options market volumes. The third one is to reduce the margin requirement on the cash market transaction side as compared to the options market. These three are important suggestions which market regulator SEBI is considering. It is likely that it could come out with a consultation paper with regards to the same proposals and its suggestions. And of course, once consultation paper is given out, after taking stakeholder views, the market regulator could take it to its board to approve the final regulations here.
Yash, many thanks. Up next, a cloud burst triggers a massive flash flood in Uttarakhand's Uttarakhand district. That and more when we return. A massive cloudburst has triggered massive flash floods in Uttarakhand's Uttarakhand district. The floods caused landslides, wiping out homes and hotels in the region. Several people are feared dead or trapped under the debris. At least 50 hotels have been submerged or washed away as per initial reports. Visuals on social media show locals climbing to higher ground to escape the floodwaters. Disaster response force teams have been rushed to the spot. The Uttarakhand government has also roped in the Indian Army for the rescue operations. Parliament continued to witness multiple disruptions as opposition lawmakers held protests and demanded a discussion on the electoral roll revision in Bihar. BJP's President JP Nadda and Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge engaged in a face-off in the Rajya Sabha. Kharge protested against what he called the presence of CISF personnel in the well of the House when members were protesting. Deputy Chairman Harivansh said the personnel were from the Parliament Security Service. House Leader Nadda, hitting back at the opposition, said they should take tuitions from him on how an opposition should behave in Parliament.
पहले के जो अपोजिशन लीडर थे उन्होंने कहा था कि डिसरप्शन इज आल्सो पार्ट ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी। ये आपको मालूम। और दूसरी चीज साहब, सीआईएसएफ जो आपने लगाया है
फिर संशोधन कराओ, सीआईएसएफ नहीं है, माननीय लीडर को सीआईएसएफ
हो गया।
यहाँ सिर्फ मार्शल ही आ सकते हैं,
नहीं
मार्शल ही आ सकते हैं।
ये देखिए, मैं पूछता हूँ आपको, क्या ये सदन आप चला रहे हैं, क्या होम मिनिस्टर अमित शाह चला रहे हैं?
मैंने इन लोगों को कई बार कहा, 40 साल से ज्यादा ऑपोजिशन में रहा हूं, कुछ मेरे से ट्यूशन ले लो, मैं बता दूंगा ऑपोजिशन कैसे करना आता है। अभी नए नए हो, अभी तो 10 ही साल हुए हैं, अभी 30-40 साल रहना है, मेरे से ट्यूशन ले लो।
In international news, Israeli forces continue to bombard Gaza, killing at least 74 Palestinians, including 36 aid seekers. The UN has said that 28 children have died from Israeli bombardment and lack of aid. Officials have said that Israel is allowing only 86 trucks of aid into Gaza a day, while a minimum of 600 trucks is actually needed to provide basic aid to starving Palestinians. The US Embassy in India has issued a stern advisory to visa holders. The embassy has warned visa holders that there will be consequences if they overstay beyond the authorized period. Visa holders not adhering to these rules could face consequences including visa revocation, possible deportation and ineligibility for future visas. The US State Department has announced that it will begin a one-year pilot program from the 20th of August. This will allow consular officers to require security bonds of $5,000, $10,000 or $15,000 from some applicants for business and tourist visas. This will be applicable for countries deemed high risk for visa overstays. India and the Philippines have announced strategic partnership. This comes after talks between the Prime Minister and visiting Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos. Prime Minister Modi said bilateral trade between the two countries has crossed $3 billion and strengthening it further is a key priority. This year marks the 75th anniversary of India-Philippines diplomatic relations. Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned. We're back in a minute with more.